Charles Fraser. The Vanished Gold. The Adventures of the Elderly Sherlock Holmes. Episode 7. Based on the characters by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. A Go audio production. It was already late in the evening. Holmes was deeply engrossed in a scientific text on molecular physics, whose main article dealt with the explanation of atomic spectra and black body radiation. He occasionally uttered "quite right" and whilst I leafed through my earlier notes, still unable to muster the courage to write down our latest case. My feelings connected to it were too personal and painful. Hesitantly, I closed my book again and glanced at Holmes. How best could I tear him away from this deadly dull reading material and start a conversation? Probably all my attempts would be doomed to failure from the outset, and it would likely be most sensible if I simply went to bed. The sudden knock at our door made us both look up. I shot Holmes a surprised glance before he responded. "Come in." Alice entered, followed by a well-dressed elderly gentleman who appeared to be in his mid-80s. "I apologise for the late disturbance, Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," said Alice, and continued justifyingly. "But this gentleman here urgently wishes to speak with you." "That's quite all right, Alice," said Holmes, reaching for his walking stick and rising sluggishly. Alice took her leave, and the unknown man approached us, extending his hand. "Please forgive my late arrival at this ungodly hour. If you permit, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Adam Huxley." "Please do take a seat, Mr. Huxley." Holmes gestured towards the empty chair and settled back into his armchair. "What can I do for you?" "It's about my gold. It has vanished without a trace," Mr. Huxley burst out. "Stolen from the bank?" I asked, irritated. "No, certainly not. At my house." Huxley shook his head in despair. "What is the value of the missing gold?" Holmes asked matter-of-factly. "About £500,000, replied Mr. Huxley. My mouth fell open at this horrendous sum, but not Holmes's. "And what form was it in? Jewellery?" asked Holmes. "Oh no, gold bars. 100 of them," exclaimed Mr. Huxley. 100 pieces? Where on earth does one keep those? Certainly not under one's pillow, I exclaimed in astonishment. Holmes also looked intently at Mr. Huxley, waiting for an answer. The elderly Mr. Huxley fidgeted nervously in his uncomfortable armchair. "In the adjoining room of my office." "Ah, secured by armoured steel, locked and bolted 5 times over, wrapped in barbed wire and hidden behind a life-sized painting," I said. Holmes shook his head. "Watson, your imagination is a sheer delight." Then Holmes addressed Mr. Huxley. "Please describe the storage of the gold to me in as much detail as possible." "There isn't much to describe. Through my office one enters another small room, approximately 130 square feet. The door to it is located behind my desk on the left. It's a perfectly ordinary door that can be locked with a completely normal key. And most of the time, the room is indeed kept locked." "Well, you must be joking," I burst out. "You're storing £500,000 worth of gold at home in a small room, sometimes locked, sometimes not. Do you live alone, and is your estate like Alcatraz?" "I live in Mayfair. My dear wife sadly passed away a few years ago. I also had to bury my only son, along with his wife. Their 3 children remained and still live with me today. 1 grandson and 2 granddaughters." "I assume you have domestic staff?" asked Holmes. "Not many anymore. I've downsized my household as much as possible. Only the cook, a maid, the butler, and 2 stable hands and yardmen remain in my service." "So let's summarise. 8 people live in your household, 9, including yourself. The missing gold consists of 100 bars. I presume they're 12.5 kilograms bars?" Mr. Huxley nodded. "Right. Each of these bars contains 400 ounces. At the current gold price of 15.52 per ounce, that amounts to slightly more than 620,000. Holmes finished his insightful summary and continued. "And now, please explain to me when you noticed the disappearance of your gold and why you're calling on me so late this evening. Actually, I had to realise over 2 weeks ago that my family treasure had vanished without a trace. Since then, I've been searching my entire estate every night and during the day whenever the opportunity arises. But nothing, not the slightest trace. I'm at my wits' end now. I'm certain that only someone from my household could be responsible. No one else knows about the gold treasure. That's why I'm calling on you so late in the evening. I sneaked out of the house and arranged for a carriage to come to you. I don't usually leave my property anymore, and I didn't want to arouse any suspicion by my departure, especially since I haven't told anyone else about the missing gold. Very well. We shall take your case, and Dr. Watson and I will confer. Please provide me with your exact residential address so that Dr. Watson and I may call on you tomorrow morning. Mr. Huxley pulled a small card from his jacket pocket and handed it to Holmes. Then he swiftly rose and strode towards the door. Holmes and I watched Mr. Huxley with envy, noting how agile and youthful he moved despite being in his mid-80s. Holmes, struck by vanity, ignored his walking stick and rose with visible difficulty. I couldn't suppress a slight smirk, which immediately earned me one of Holmes's evil glares. "Gentlemen," said Mr. Huxley as he departed, "I thank you and shall expect you tomorrow morning. Thank you for taking on my case. Good evening." "And how shall we proceed tomorrow?" I asked Holmes after old Mr. Huxley had left. "I don't know yet. I'm going to bed now. You should do the same, Watson." "I thought you wanted to consult with me. That's what you just told Huxley." "Good night, Watson," Holmes called out before disappearing. I snorted with contempt. Typical Holmes. How could I possibly believe he would still consult with me? As if he had ever done that. Nevertheless, I had to smile. "Good night, Watson," I said to myself, and went to bed. When Holmes and I sat down for breakfast with the Millers the next day, I informed Alice and Eddy about our late visitor from the previous evening. How can anyone hoard so much money at home, and in gold bars at that? Alice shook her head in disbelief. These bars must take up a tremendous amount of space. I wouldn't even know where to put them, unless, of course, I were to evict you both. Alice looked challengingly at Holmes. He countered. "Or you could let us stay here and use the money to buy yourself a proper house." "Touché," Alice grinned. "But joking aside, how do you intend to proceed? Do you already have a plan?" I waited eagerly for Holmes's answer. Let's see if he would reveal more to dear Alice than he had to me. But of course, that wasn't the case. "My good friend Watson here and I will have a look around at Mr. Huxley's, and then, as they say, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." Barely 2 hours later, Holmes and I were already standing in Mr. Huxley's foyer. The maid had let us in and asked us to wait here for Mr. Huxley. The maid, named Betty, was in her late 30s, had a slim figure and finely chiselled features. Unfortunately, her appearance benefited when she refrained from smiling. Not only was she missing 2 front teeth, but the remaining ones were afflicted by an unsightly yellow-blackish discoloration. Conscious of this flaw, she kept her lips tightly pressed together. Her eyes, however, shone all the brighter. We did not have to wait long before Mr. Huxley appeared, looking as fresh and agile as when we had met him yesterday evening. Holmes automatically began to ease the pressure on his walking stick and stopped leaning on it. "How lovely to see you here, gentlemen," Mr. Huxley greeted us. "If you would be so kind as to follow me to my office. Oh, and Betty, would you be so kind as to bring us a cup of tea upstairs?" Betty gave a slight curtsy, and Holmes and I followed Mr. Huxley upstairs to the first floor, where his office was located. My gaze immediately fell upon the locked door behind his desk. "Do take a seat, please," Mr. Huxley urged us. Betty then appeared with the tea. Holmes took a small sip of the hot brew before rising and saying, "Might we have a look at your gold vault?" "But of course." Mr. Huxley rose immediately, pulled a standard key from the bottom drawer of his desk, and unlocked the door. "Do you always keep the key in your desk drawer?" I asked. Huxley nodded. "Is this drawer usually locked?" Mr. Huxley shook his head. "You see, Mr. Watson, my grandchildren and our servants are a well-coordinated team. We trust and value each other. There is no ill will or envy amongst us, not even a harsh word. We are all one family. That's why everyone in my household knows about the gold. They are all long-standing members of my family, and none of them would ever think of taking something that doesn't belong to them." He paused briefly. "Or so I believed until now. Apparently, the empty gold chamber proves my delusion wrong." Mr. Huxley lowered his head sadly. Holmes opened the door and entered the empty chamber. He paced the room in a few steps. I followed him eagerly inside, but was disappointed to find that there really was nothing exciting to see in there, and as far as I could tell from Holmes's face, I was certain that he couldn't discover anything either. Holmes came out and scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Mr. Huxley, have you had any strangers in the house lately? Workmen, visitors, or anything of that sort?" Mr. Huxley shook his head. "And, as you already mentioned, you are always at home and rarely leave the house. Was this also the case in the days before you discovered that your gold was missing?" The old Mr. Huxley denied this question as well. "Very well," said Holmes. "Then we really must assume that we shall find the perpetrator among, as you so aptly put it, family. Could you please arrange for all members of your household to gather in the drawing-room? I would like you to introduce me to everyone. Then I shall request to speak with each of you individually." "But of course, Mr. Holmes." Mr. Huxley immediately reached for the bell, and shortly afterwards Betty appeared. "Betty, please tell me, are my grandchildren present, and the two lads as well?" Betty nodded eagerly. "As far as I know, yes, sir. Zachary has just returned from whatever he was doing, and Tony is still in the stable, but I can quickly send for him." "Please do that, Betty. Everyone is to meet in the drawing-room at once." Holmes and I had already made our way to the sumptuously furnished drawing-room and settled ourselves on a comfortable-looking sofa. One by one, they gradually arrived. When all members of the household had finally gathered, Mr. Huxley took the floor. "Thank you all for finding the time so quickly and making your way here. These two gentlemen," he gestured towards Holmes and myself, "are Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson. They will ask you some questions in turn and get to know you better." Confusion spread among the residents, but Mr. Huxley continued. "A few days ago, an incident occurred here that makes the presence of these two gentlemen essential and justifies their questions. So please, be cooperative and answer their questions in good conscience. I thank you." Holmes cleared his throat audibly, briefly studied all those present, and then said, "Good day, ladies and gentlemen. As you have already been informed, I am Mr. Holmes, and this is my partner, Dr. Watson. I would like to begin immediately without further ado." Then Holmes pointed to a well-dressed young man in his mid-30s. "Am I correct in assuming that you are Mr. Huxley, Jr.?" "Yes, that would be me, sir," he replied amiably. "If I may ask you to accompany us to the adjoining room," said Holmes, and young Mr. Huxley followed us straight away. The adjoining room was somewhat smaller and furnished in an exceedingly cosy and tasteful manner. Young Mr. Huxley took a seat at a round, beautifully decorated table opposite Holmes and myself. "Might I inquire as to your given name?" asked Holmes. "Of course. My name is Gerald Huxley. My two sisters and I are old Mr. Huxley's grandchildren. Our father was his son. Sadly, our parents both lost their lives in a tragic accident years ago. Since then, we have been living here on our grandfather's estate." "I am already aware of that. Do you have a good relationship?" asked Holmes. "Oh yes," Gerald Huxley beamed. "My grandfather is truly a kind-hearted man. But if you'll permit me to ask, what incident are we actually talking about? I haven't noticed anything of the sort in the past few days. Should I be seriously worried?" "Are you aware of the gold that your grandfather keeps in the room in his office?" "But of course, that's no secret," replied Gerald Huxley. "Well, it has disappeared," said Holmes. "Disappeared?" young Huxley repeated in disbelief. "But where on earth could it have gone? One doesn't simply stroll out the door with 100 gold bars." "Quite right, and that's precisely what my colleague and I are here to find out. Have you noticed anything unusual lately? Has anyone been behaving strangely?" I said. Gerald Huxley seemed to only truly notice me now, and stared at me in bewilderment. "No, nothing of the sort." Holmes nodded approvingly. "Mr. Huxley, what does your daily routine look like here on the estate? Would you mind describing it to me? You don't actually think I had something to do with the theft, do you?" asked Gerald Huxley, horrified. "No, I don't believe that," Holmes reassured him. "But I need to get a better insight into the daily routine here, and that includes your perspective. To be honest, I enjoy my life. My grandfather owns a successful company and various rental properties and storage facilities. My two sisters and I want for nothing. Usually I get up early in the morning and start with a hearty breakfast. Then I go for a morning horse ride, after which I study for my degree, which I'm only pursuing for respectability's sake, really just for fun. I have various hobbies, such as woodland walks, fishing, reading and music. That's about it, really. Mr. Huxley, please excuse my indiscreet question, but what about your marriage prospects? Is there someone special? I mean, a handsome, charming young man from a respectable and secure background. Surely the ladies must be falling at your feet." Gerald Huxley blushed. He began fidgeting with his fingers and shifted nervously in his seat. "Well," he said hesitantly, "you know how it is. A romance here, another there. Thus far, I'm afraid there hasn't been anyone worth marrying." Gerald Huxley fidgeted with his leather bracelet. "Mr. Huxley, where did you get that lovely bracelet from?" "Oh, this?" Young Huxley raised his right arm. "Oh, I can't say for certain anymore." "That doesn't matter. I'll ask your butler about it," said Holmes. Gerald Huxley's face turned beetroot red. "What do you mean by that, Mr. Holmes?" "Well, he's wearing the same bracelet as you. Perhaps he still remembers where he got it from." Stammered Gerald Huxley, but Holmes interrupted him. "Let's not beat about the bush. You and the butler are lovers." I wouldn't have thought it possible for Huxley's face to turn an even deeper shade of red, but it was possible. "That's nothing you need to be ashamed of. Besides, your secret is safe with us. Isn't that right, Holmes?" "But yes, certainly," Holmes agreed with me. "Mr. Huxley, you haven't yet described to me how you spend your evenings, but I'm fairly well informed about that, so I'll spare you any detailed explanations." "Is there anything else you'd like to know from me?" Gerald Huxley asked meekly. "Thank you, Mr. Huxley, but that will be all. You may return to your daily affairs now. We are finished with you here." Gerald Huxley bid farewell with a crimson face and heavily perspiring. As he closed the door behind him, I said to Holmes, "I don't think we have found our perpetrator yet, but you have managed to expose an innocent homosexual. Well done, Holmes. Do spare us both your sarcasm, and please show in Huxley's sister. Thank you, Watson." A few moments later, I returned to the cosy side room with one of the sisters to Holmes. "If I might first ask for your full name," Holmes began. "My name is Annabel Huxley," the sister replied emotionlessly. I believe she was somewhat younger than her brother Gerald. She too was properly dressed, even though she apparently didn't place much importance on it. Annabel Huxley was surrounded by a depressing aura, and she had an unmistakable smell of alcohol about her. Judging by Holmes's expression, he had just caught a whiff of it. "Mrs. Huxley, to answer your question right away, a few days ago your grandfather's gold vault was robbed," said Holmes. But Annabel Huxley remained unimpressed and didn't bat an eyelid. "Have you noticed anything unusual regarding this matter, or has anyone in your circle perhaps behaved differently than usual?" "No, Mr. Holmes. I haven't noticed anything, and I don't know anything about a gold robbery. I'm afraid I can't help you." Annabel Huxley was already about to leave, but Holmes held her back. "That's quite all right. Please, at least give us some insight into your daily routine." Sceptically, Annabel sat down again and appeared thoughtful. "There's nothing specific. I get up, read a lot, go for walks, help a bit with the housework and with the horses, eat, keep my grandfather company, drinks a glass or two of the strong stuff," I added silently. Holmes could read me like an open book, and this train of thought evidently did not escape him either. He pursed his lips and raised an eyebrow while giving me a tight-lipped nod. May I ask you the same question about your marriage prospects that I already asked your brother? I have none. Annabel's answer was short and to the point, too brief for Holmes, who pressed further. There was never anyone in your life. Come now, you can't expect an old man like me to believe that. A beautiful young woman like yourself. And Holmes was right. Annabel Huxley was truly a sight to behold. If it weren't for this deeply melancholic aura that surrounded her, from which she seemingly couldn't break free. Yes, of course, she spoke hesitantly. There was someone once, but that's in the past and long ago. What happened then? Holmes wanted to know. We were going to get married. We were even engaged. I loved him. Then she fell silent. Has he passed away? Your fiancé, I mean? I asked sympathetically, painfully aware once again of my own loss. No, I believe he's quite well. Did you want children? Asked Holmes. Holmes, how indiscreet, I scolded him, until I suddenly noticed how Annabel's eyes were welling up. A tear trickled down her ashen cheek. Holmes took her hand comfortingly. You were pregnant and lost the child, didn't you? Annabel's tears now flowed ceaselessly, as if all the floodgates had burst open. You are young, you are beautiful, and you have heart. Don't throw your life away. Don't give yourself over entirely to grief. That serves no one. Dare to make a fresh start and find happiness before it's too late. Annabel looked up and gazed deeply into Holmes's eyes. Take an old man at his word and believe me. He squeezed her hand firmly once more. We're finished here. Rest now, my dear, and promise me one thing. From now on, do without the occasional glass or two. When Annabel Huxley left the room, leaving Holmes and me behind, I said to Holmes, How in the devil's name did you know about this woman's misfortune? It wasn't difficult to deduce. She has a serious alcohol problem, is young, beautiful, but deeply depressed, and shows no interest in her surroundings or relationships. She mentioned there was once someone who hadn't died, and from that point the situation was clear to me. But the relationship could have simply broken down, I pointed out. There is no greater pain for a woman than the loss of her own child, be it born or unborn. Something has broken within this woman that no man could ever break. We sat in silence for a few minutes until Holmes spoke again and said, Watson, would you be so kind as to show in the next nurse? I'm genuinely curious about this conversation. Let me sum up. In interview number 2, still no perpetrator, but instead a weeping, devastated woman exposed as an alcoholic. I'm not sure you're making any friends here, Holmes. Sister number 2 had a slightly arrogant demeanour about her. Certainly she too was a beautiful woman, but she lacked that natural quality. She simply didn't have that sparkle in her eyes. Your full name, please? Holmes opened the conversation. My name is Lucinda Huxley, Mr. Holmes, she said coquettishly. Holmes also revealed to her the secret of the missing gold. However, she too seemed completely surprised by this fact and denied having experienced any strange events. When Holmes asked her about her daily routine, she replied, Well, you see, a lady such as myself doesn't pursue any specific occupation. I spend a great deal of time maintaining my appearance and taking care of myself. But surely one cannot spend the entire blessed day doing that, I blurted out. No, certainly not all day, and she smiled mischievously. Let's get straight to the point, said Holmes. You're having an affair with a wealthy married man, and are waiting, as I can assure you from experience, in vain for him to leave his wife and commit to you. Lucinda Huxley's mouth fell open for a moment. How do you know that? You're wearing exceptionally valuable, expensive jewellery that you couldn't possibly afford yourself. This means you received these pieces from someone, and this someone is certainly not your grandfather. While you don't need to contribute to your living expenses, good Mr. Huxley isn't quite that extravagant. Therefore, this can only be a married man. Otherwise, you would have already boasted about an engagement or mentioned your chosen one in your daily routine. But you haven't. And how do I know that your lover won't leave his wife? If he were really considering it, he would have done so long ago, as your, let's call it, relationship, has been going on for quite some time now, which one can deduce from the many expensive pieces of jewellery you're wearing. But he promised me, didn't he? Said Lucinda incredulously. Men make many promises when it suits them. End the affair and find yourself something respectable before you become unhappy. I have no further questions for you. Good day. And with these words, Holmes dismissed Lucinda Huxley. Holmes, when on earth did you become a life coach? I could no longer contain my laughter. Age brings wisdom, dear Watson. Nevertheless, I would like to uncover the secret of old Huxley. Did you notice how this octogenarian sprinted up the stairs? I laughed out loud. I knew this circumstance would bother you. Next, I brought in one of the lads. His name was Zachary, and he was responsible for all the work in and around the estate. Zachary, are you aware that your employer's gold has been stolen? Holmes asked the young man. Good heavens, no, Zachary blurted out. So that's why you're here. You're detectives, aren't you? Have you found the culprit yet? No, of course not. Otherwise you wouldn't still be questioning me, would you? Holmes replied pragmatically. You have already correctly answered each of your own questions. Do you have any idea who might have done it? You think it was one of us? Yes, I suppose you must. No, I have no idea, and I haven't noticed anything peculiar either, because that's surely your next question. Am I right? Yes, you do, Holmes replied curtly, apparently taking a dislike to the young chap. Tell me, you've only just returned? Where exactly were you? Holmes wanted to know. I was out for a walk, Zachary replied curtly. Are you a hunter? No. Oh my, Zachary's answers were becoming more monosyllabic. Do you own a weapon, a rifle? No again, whatever gave you that idea? Well, in that case, you've just lied to me. You were poaching. Zachary started to laugh unnaturally. Me? Poaching? Most certainly not. You've come straight from the woods. This is proven by the traces of soil and moss on your shoes and trousers. Moreover, you have small blood splatters on your trousers, and I'll assume in your favour that it's animal blood rather than human blood. The faint scent of a discharged weapon still clings to your clothing. Additionally, you're wearing what appears to be a fox's canine tooth as a pendant around your neck. Based on the evidence I've gathered and your previous statements, I dare say you've already committed the crime of poaching today. Pah! I must say, exclaimed Zachary, you truly are a master of your craft. You should know, I absolutely love detective novels. It's one of my passions. You mean besides poaching? I blurted out cheekily. Young Zachary appeared visibly impressed by Holmes's abilities. He had completely forgotten that Holmes had just caught him committing a crime. Zachary, I'm done with you for now. Go to your chamber and wash up and put on something clean. I couldn't believe that Holmes was already dismissing Zachary. But Holmes, why are you letting the fellow go already? Are you certain he has nothing to do with the gold theft? I asked Holmes once Zachary had left. Quite certain. Although he lied to me about the weapon and may have committed a crime, I don't believe he would betray his master in such a way. An honest criminal, you mean? We shall see what the next round of interviews reveals. Otherwise, we might have to revisit Zachary after all. Next, it was young Tony's turn. Holmes also confided in him about the gold theft incident, and he too seemed visibly outraged about it. But he couldn't provide any further insights either. What duties do you have here on the estate? Holmes wanted to know from Tony. Strictly speaking, I'm the stable boy. That sounds rather negative coming from you, Holmes observed. No, not at all. I enjoy looking after the horses. Besides, I also help Zachary when he's in a pinch. Do you get along well, you and Zachary? Yes, just like with everyone else. Zach and I simply spend a lot of time together since we're about the same age and share common interests. So you also like to roam through the forest without permission? Why without permission? Anyone can go into the forest whenever they fancy, said Tony. So either this Tony was an excellent actor, or he genuinely knew nothing about his friend's poaching activities. Which mutual interests are you referring to then? Holmes pressed. We tinker around a lot together, fix things, and just while away the time. What is your relationship with your own family like? if you spend your leisure time here on the estate as well?" Suddenly, young Tony's voice grew a bit quieter. "I haven't got any family left. My mother died right at the start of the Spanish flu. I was already too old for the orphanage, so they took me in here and I started looking after the horses." "Why did you end up here of all places?" Holmes inquired. The cook at the time, God rest her soul, apparently had connections to the orphanage. "May I ask about your plans for the future?" "Oh, there isn't much to tell," said the young man. "But surely you must have some prospects. Isn't there a young lady you're fond of?" "No," Tony replied coldly. "Unlucky in love," I chimed in. And then I had a flash of inspiration. "Surely not one of the Huxley sisters?" Tony grimaced, which only strengthened my suspicion. "Annabel or Lucinda? Tough choice. I wouldn't know which of the two I'd prefer." "The one self-centred with rudimentary intellect," I added in my thoughts. "The other, a beautiful but nonetheless alcoholic woman." "I think we can end your questioning, Tony," Holmes stated clearly. "I wish you all the best." The next in line was the very corpulent Mrs Fitzgerald, the house cook. "Mrs Fitzgerald, the reason we wish to speak with you is the fact that your employer's gold has been stolen." Mrs Fitzgerald turned deathly pale with shock, then visibly began to sweat profusely. Her face changed from initially chalk white to lobster red. For a brief moment, I almost felt compelled to check her vital signs. Mrs Fitzgerald's agitation soon subsided as she sat there, pondering intently about any peculiarities. But no, she too couldn't confirm any unusual occurrences. Then suddenly, something seemed to strike her. Her pulse visibly began to race. Her face changed colour once again, and she started speaking hastily. "Now I've got it, Mr Holmes. Now I know where I've heard your name before. You're that master detective who solves every case and catches all the criminals. No case is too tricky for you. No secret is safe from you." "My dear lady, thank you for the kind words," replied Holmes, visibly flattered. "But your description seems more fitting for a character in a novel than for the person standing before you." But suddenly, Mrs Fitzgerald's euphoric mood changed to one of anxiety. She fell silent instantly and pressed her thin lips tightly together. Her eyes were wide open and watchful. Holmes was startled by this abrupt change of mood. "Mrs Fitzgerald, what's the matter? Is there anything I can do for you?" "Mr Holmes, I confess everything." The woman began to whimper. Holmes and I looked at each other in bewilderment. "You confess to having stolen the gold?" I asked cautiously. "Oh, the gold, no, of course not," she exclaimed. "But I am guilty of other transgressions." She suddenly burst into tears. This day at the Huxleys was slowly beginning to test my good nature. Holmes must have felt the same way. "But in heaven's name, what have you done, my good woman?" he said. "Yes, I confess. I admit it," she exclaimed theatrically. Out of spurned love and a broken heart, I spat in unsuspecting Bobby's soup and served him dog food. Now she too wept uncontrollably and pleaded, "May I be forgiven and not punished too harshly? Besides, I have confessed. Please, Mr Holmes, put in a good word for me." Holmes kept a straight face while I felt as though I was about to burst inside. "Dear Mrs Fitzgerald, you really needn't worry yourself," I tried to reassure her, though it took every ounce of my strength not to burst out laughing. Should I tell poor Mrs Fitzgerald the real reason for Bobby's dismissive behaviour? Something akin to my medical oath of confidentiality crossed my mind, and I decided against it. "Watson, do something," I heard Holmes implore. I took Mrs Fitzgerald by the arm and escorted her to the door. "Well, that only leaves the butler Bobby then," I said to Holmes. "For questioning or as the perpetrator?" asked Holmes. "I think both." "Don't be too sure about that," Holmes said ominously. "Watson, do show him in." A few moments later, Holmes and I found ourselves seated across from butler Bobby. "Your name is Bobby, correct?" I asked. "Please call me Robert. Actually, there's only one person here who calls me Bobby." "Then you know exactly who we've been talking to about you," I said. Robert nodded, and I continued. "Is she a good cook? Mrs Fitzgerald, I mean. Have you ever noticed anything unusual about the food?" "Watson, I believe I'll take over from here." Holmes gave me a stern look. "Robert, how long have you been working here at the Huxleys' residence?" The butler pondered briefly before answering. "That would be almost exactly 15 years now." "Then you must surely know about the gold that Mr. Huxley has stored in the side room of his office?" "But of course, everyone in the house knows about it. I've seen it quite a few times myself. Mr. Huxley can be rather careless about locking the door, and whenever it was left open, I made sure to point it out to him." "Then you must have certainly heard that said gold has been stolen." "What? Good heavens! No, I didn't know that." "Well, now you know. Please think carefully. Have you noticed anything unusual in the past few days? Has anyone behaved strangely? Were there any strangers in the house?" After a brief moment, Robert replied, "No, sir, nothing of the sort." "Thank you, Robert. That will be all. You may return to your work." The butler said goodbye and closed the door behind him. "But Holmes, why didn't you ask him anything about his personal background? You dismissed him too quickly." "I disagree. Why should we torment this man with personal questions that are irrelevant to the matter at hand and, quite frankly, none of our business? This man is honest to the core. Let us speak with Mr. Huxley Sr. once more. Perhaps we've overlooked something. Or perhaps the perpetrator isn't among the household members after all. We have, after all, recovered all the bodies from the cellar," I observed. "No, I am certain we have already questioned the thief. Watson, think about it. We're dealing with a very large quantity of gold bars here. These have considerable weight and require a certain amount of space. A thief from outside the house cannot simply march in here, empty the entire room and transport everything away at once. This procedure takes time. I'm even convinced that the gold is still somewhere here on the premises. But as I said, let's speak to Mr. Huxley Sr. once more. Watson, would you be so kind as to ask him to join us?" "So how is the evidence collection coming along?" Mr. Huxley asked us euphorically. "Unfortunately, not as we had hoped," Holmes admitted. "While we learned a great deal of interesting information from your grandchildren and staff, nothing useful has emerged that could help us solve the case. Is there anything else from your side that we absolutely need to know?" "I wouldn't know what," replied Mr. Huxley. But Holmes wasn't satisfied with that. "Mr. Huxley, you are an honourable man. That much is certain. But hasn't there been a single situation in your past where you didn't act properly? Something you'd most like to undo today? How did you come by your wealth? Did you engage in any shady dealings? Do you owe anyone anything? Have you ever behaved inappropriately towards any of your grandchildren or employees? Anything that you might not see a connection to, but that could still be important? Think carefully. We currently have no other leads or directions in which to investigate." "No, I can't think of anything," Mr. Huxley said after intense reflection. "The only thing I regret now was a brief affair with a woman from the village. I was already old then, while she was just a young thing. She fell pregnant and I bought her silence. But that has nothing to do with this and happened over 20 years ago. Lord knows I'm not proud of it. Mr. Huxley, Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson, come quickly." Betty came running through the door, breathing heavily and barely able to get a sensible word out due to her excitement. "I only understood Zachary. Shot, doctor." But these 3 words were enough to throw us into a state of high alarm and follow the breathless Betty. She ran straight outside and towards the stable. I saw young Zachary lying on the ground covered in blood. I stood frozen before him. My trauma lay before me in the form of my beloved wife Caroline, dead on the ground. I felt cold, sweat broke out from every pore and I began to shake. Then Holmes grabbed me by the shoulders, shook me vigorously and shouted at me, "Watson, the boy's still alive. Quickly, he's bleeding out." The doctor in me gained control over my demons. I knelt purposefully beside the gravely injured Zachary. A quick check. His pulse was still palpable, but very shaky and weak. His breathing was laboured and blood was pouring from his torso. With a forceful tug, I ripped open his shirt. I needed to locate the entry wound, but this was easier said than done given the amount of blood. The bullet must have hit a major artery. Yes, here was the entry wound. I had found it. But it didn't look good. I quickly tore off my own shirt and pressed it as firmly as possible against young Zachary's wound. I also demanded Holmes's coat, which I pressed on top of my makeshift pressure bandage that was already soaked with blood. I felt Zachary's heart beat once, twice, 3 times before it ceased to function. Zachary's eyes, wide with horror, looked at me reproachfully. He simply died under my hands. I felt Holmes's hand on my drooping shoulders, attempting to offer comfort. Yet, in such a moment, all consolation is futile. Nobody said a word. I heard Betty quietly sobbing to herself. Mr. Huxley sat slumped on a bale of straw. All strength had left him. Holmes's words pierced the silence. The gunshot wound came from a rifle, buckshot, the sort one uses for hunting. Or for poaching, I said tonelessly. What happened, Holmes? Surely he didn't shoot himself. Or was this meant to be a confession? Holmes shook his head. No, Watson. I'm certain Zachary uncovered the secret and had to die because of it. Finally, Mr. Huxley seemed to regain his composure and came to join us. Holmes paced through the stable, examining it carefully. His gaze scrutinised the dusty, straw-covered floor inch by inch. He stopped at one of the empty stalls. Mr. Huxley and I followed him. The floor was thickly covered with straw, yet the way it was laid suggested a perfect hiding place. Holmes pushed the straw aside with his foot. A bare wooden floor emerged underneath. Nothing again, I noted discouragingly. Wait and see, Watson. Holmes bent down low to the ground, his back creaking, but he continued feeling around with his bony fingers. He managed to grasp a loose board, then another, and then the next. After just the second board, the carefully hidden gold gleamed through. We cleared the entire box of its wooden floor, revealing a veritable treasure beneath. Mr. Huxley, here is your treasure that was believed to be lost, said Holmes. Huxley, however, showed no particular reaction to this, but merely asked one question. Who was it? It was Tony, your son. This unexpected revelation of late fatherhood made the otherwise steadfast-looking Mr. Huxley stagger. My son? I don't understand. You had just told us about your affair when Betty interrupted us with this shocking news. Well, Tony is the result of your affair. But I had no idea, stammered Mr. Huxley. You didn't, but Tony apparently did. Perhaps his mother told him before she died? Perhaps he could put 2 and 2 together and recognise the physical resemblance to you. I don't know, but it seems he thought he was entitled to your family gold. So Tony wasn't in love with Annabel or Lucinda at all, as I had wrongly assumed, but rather it was envy that made him react that way, I concluded. Quite right, Watson, Holmes praised me. Tony definitely removed the gold bar by bar from your office and hid it here in the stable, which was rather obvious since he spent most of his time here. Zachary must have caught him by surprise when he wanted to check once more that the gold was safely stored. I reckon there was a scuffle between the lads. During this, Tony stole Zachary's rifle and shot him. What an irony of fate! Poaching with it in the morning, shot dead with it in the afternoon, I said. Watson, you're being rather theatrical today, Holmes scolded me. Suddenly, a shot rang out. That came from the house, Mr. Huxley called excitedly. We hurriedly ran back to the residence, where Robert, the butler, was already approaching us with a chalk-white face. What has happened? Cried Mr. Huxley. It's Tony, stammered Robert, in your study. We hurried up the stairs to the first floor, but the office was empty. Here, I called. Tony was lying dead in the office's adjoining room, where just a few days ago the family gold had been stored. Slowly, Mr. Huxley walked towards Tony and gently knelt beside him. He didn't dare touch him, but simply stared at him. 2 dead boys. And for what? For gold, for a family treasure. But what good is the greatest treasure of gold if it destroys the true treasure, the family? You were listening to Charles Fraser, The Vanished Gold. The Adventures of the Elderly Sherlock Holmes. Episode 7. Based on the characters by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. a Go audio production.